about your laptops and the program in general and CompPsych and these workshops and a lot of the things that we're going to be offering throughout the semester and the year. So make sure that if you haven't already read through that email, you do. And if you have any questions, general questions about the program, please respond to that email and your program coordinator will respond. But today we are lucky to be joined by Sana, and she is with the Sanger Learning Center, which is a great resource here on campus. They are offering everything virtually as well this semester. So you can have private tutoring, group tutoring, workshops, all sorts of things that she will tell you more about. But today we're going to focus on staying organized and succeeding in online classes. So pay attention, ask questions, let us know if you need anything. The Q&A feature is open, and we are going to reserve the chat for the interactive activities that Sana has for us today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over, and it's all you, Sana.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. As she mentioned before, we are going to be talking about how to be successful in online courses, reflect on all of the current strategies that we've been using in our in-person classes and how those would translate over, and also exploring tips and resources that you can use to be able to start the semester off strong. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Sana. I'm a Management Information Systems senior, and something that is just like a fun fact about me is that I actually grew up in a joint family of 10 people, and so quarantine had been absolute chaos back in Dallas, just 10 of us under one roof with nowhere to go. I'm an outreach and communication specialist for Sanger, and what that means is that I go and I give these presentations on time management and study skills, and now, of course, online learning. And I'm really excited to be able to share all of these amazing free resources that Sanger has to offer with everyone. So the great thing about this workshop is that it's designed to be more of a conversation rather than just a presentation. And so please, please, please feel encouraged to go ahead and type your questions in the chat, unmute your mic. Well, you couldn't unmute your mic in this webinar, but typically we would ask that of you. But just pretend like that chat is you unmuting your mic. Go ahead and go forth and respond with any type of feedback or personal experience that you want to draw upon there. There'll be a lot of questions throughout that I'm hoping will help stimulate that discussion. And then also use your reaction buttons. Give me a thumbs up or yes or no, or whatever other participant reactions you want to use to be able to engage with the content. So just to squeeze a little bit of quick practice in before we get into the meat of the content. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Zoom at this point, but just to go ahead and give this a test, if everyone could go ahead and just use the chat and send their major in there, that would be super helpful. Okay, neuroscience, psychology, social work, biology, finance. It seems like we have a really wide, diverse range of majors here today, and hopefully all of you will be able to take something away and implement the content that we go over today in your day-to-day. Thank you so much for participating right there, and let's keep that participation up throughout the entire presentation. So this is a brief overview of our agenda for today. We'll be talking about how to build your brand and kind of understand a little bit more of what that means in a virtual setting. Then we'll be talking about how to get organized. And then we'll talk about SLC services. And of course, at the end, we'll do a quick survey just to get some feedback on this workshop, seeing as it is a new workshop and it's something that we are still trying to improve upon and make sure that it has the content that benefits you. So before we move forward, take a second, go ahead and grab some paper and a writing utensil, and then we'll go ahead and move into the meat of the content. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is building your brand. So send a quick yes in the chat if you've ever heard of a personal brand. What is a personal brand? Okay, so it seems like most of you have heard of a personal brand before. A better question would be, what is a personal brand to you? What does that make you think of? Most people think of it in a professional or a networking sense, but we're talking about in your day-to-day. What is your personal brand? What does that mean? How people see you. Aria, that is 100% correct. Marvin says represent yourself. Yes, definitely. So your personal brand is this image that you're cultivating of yourself, right? And so as you go into the classroom, in an in-person classroom, there are certain things that you do that contribute to your personal brand. By showing up to class on time every day and being attentive, you're showing that you're responsible and you care about the content that you're learning, right? So in that vein, how do you want people to perceive you? What do you want people to think of you, your professors and your classmates, when you go into the classroom? As a nice person, definitely. Just throw some adjectives out there. How do you want people to perceive you? How do you want your professors to see you? How do you want your classmates to see you? Intelligent, engaged, responsible, ambitious, funny, hardworking, definitely. So we all want our classmates and our professors to think well of us, to say nice things about us. We want them to find us friendly, helpful, hardworking, the ideal team member, right? But that just doesn't happen with the snap of a finger. It takes a lot of effort to be able to cultivate that image, right? So think about the ways in which you can go about creating this personal student brand with instructors and with your fellow students. What would you have done in an in-person class in order to create that image? You could even reference your high school experiences and think about them. What are some things that students can do in an in-person class to communicate that they're smart, prepared, considerate? Show up early, definitely. Sit near the front and always go to office hours. Go to tutoring and introduce yourself to your professor, definitely. So showing up to office hours is really crucial, and it's something that can definitely be translated over even in a Zoom classroom, right? Professors are still allotting this specific designated amount of time to answering your questions and getting your feedback on the content and really helping you in your journey to understand and to truly comprehend that content, right? Also coming prepared with valid questions. That's also a really, really good point. Just making sure that you are prepared and still engaged despite the fact that you might not necessarily be in person and be able to give those nonverbal cues like nodding your head or jotting down notes to show that you're interacting with the content. So what are some other things that you can potentially do in a Zoom classroom or even in this like webinar space to show that you are engaged with the content? Participate, yes. Thank you for participating and doing that. Smiling, turning on cameras, that's all really helpful. right? Because for your professors, oftentimes they're kind of speaking into the void, especially if you're in those 300, 400 person classrooms or virtual classrooms where there's not enough bandwidth for everyone to be able to keep their cameras on. And so the professor might just be talking and then looking at the chat, like I am right now, trying to understand, okay, is the content getting through? What questions might they have? Trying to gauge that interest. So here are some of the tips that Sanger came up with in terms of showing your online class engagement. You can definitely use the chat as you've been doing. You can use your reaction buttons. You can use participation buttons to raise your hand and go ahead and ask those questions. I know it can be intimidating to unmute in those classes and for fear of like interrupting someone else or interrupting the professor. So using that raise hand function really comes in handy. And then also turning that camera on, as everyone has been saying, is very, very helpful. Also, those basic greetings, good morning, thank you, have a good day. That's a really great point as well, Kedar. That can definitely come in handy, just in that there's still people you're interacting with, even though it is in a virtual setting and you might not be able to talk face to face. Having those pleasantries in there can really just brighten up someone's day. So who here is in an asynchronous class right now? Asynchronous meaning that you're not meeting at a scheduled time on a scheduled day every day. It seems like we have a lot of people in asynchronous classes as well. I'm personally in one right now, and it can be a bit of a challenge, right? It can be a bit of a struggle. So what are some of the challenges that you're currently facing with taking an asynchronous class? A lot of reading, and that reading can definitely pile up, right? As like oftentimes like you end up prioritizing the class that you're actually going to consistently over the class that has all its deadlines at the end of the semester, and you don't necessarily have to have that sense of urgency to complete work right away. It's a lot of self-paced material. And yeah, you have to set deadlines for yourself and keep yourself accountable for sure. Showing up to lecture just to have a regular conversation, not discuss the material from the reading. Could you expand on that? Not seeing the professor regularly at a class can definitely feel weird. I completely understand, Afreen. But that doesn't mean just because you don't have a scheduled designated time with a professor for the class period that they don't have office hours or they don't have other means for you to reach out to them and communicate with them and get those questions answered. Definitely don't hesitate to use whatever mode of communication they've established, whether that be email, Piazza, Slack, whatever they've been using to communicate with you or they've encouraged you to use to reach out to them, because they're hosting this course to make sure you understand the content. And if you don't understand the content, this is the time for you to reach out and let them know rather than pushing it off until the end of the semester. Elisa said, I always focus on the classes I go to and forget about the class that we meet once a week. Yeah, no, definitely. Just because when you have that consistency and that regularity, it's much easier to keep it at the front of your mind. So with asynchronous classes, something that you could do to add that consistency is potentially setting up some type of study group with other people who are also in an asynchronous class, just to help create the system of accountability with others as well, right? And also meeting with your TAs and your professors to get those questions answered. In asynchronous communication, all communication is via email or office hours, which I feel slows down the process. It definitely can. It definitely can feel like it's slowing down the process, but if you do have a study group or some type of system in which you can get your questions answered more quickly, that can definitely help with speeding it back up again. So we will be touching a little bit more on how to create those study groups in future slides, but just keep that at the back of your mind as well. Something that Kedar touched on really well in the chat, though, was how most of that communication is being done through email. And in order to uphold that personal brand that we were talking about earlier, you have to be really aware of like what you're saying in these emails and how you're coming across. And so in order to do that, you also have to keep email etiquette in mind, and that can be really difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and show you an email that definitely needs some help. It definitely needs some improvement. There's a lot of things that are wrong with it. I'm going to let you go ahead and try to spot a few things. Once you find something, go ahead and send it in the chat and we can talk a little bit about it. The subject line, Rachel, you are right on. The subject line says help in all caps. That is most definitely a problem because for one, and personally, like anytime I receive any emails with all caps in the subject line, I either delete it or it automatically goes straight to spam. And so it's just one of those things where you want to make sure that you aren't keeping that in all caps, and you're also being as specific as possible about what the email entails. Think about your professors. They're getting tons and tons of emails every day. And so knowing that it's a specific question about a specific problem will probably get your question answered a lot more quickly than something as broad as help. I see there's a lot of other things coming in the chat. Grammar and capitalization and punctuation, those things are crucial. And the funny thing is this email is actually about someone asking for help with reviewing their paper that's coming up. And they didn't even really review this email. And so it's kind of one of those questioning things where it's like, why would the professor be willing to help you with that if you weren't even willing to do your due diligence beforehand and actually review the capitalization and punctuation and make sure that this email was grammatically correct. Alondra said, it's nice if you end it with your full name and EID. Definitely. You want to make sure that you're including those identifying factors. And so just saying, thanks, Jamie, could potentially come across as confusing for a professor, right? As they're looking at it, that they might have multiple sections with multiple Jamies. And so having your first and last name, your EID, and your section time would be really, really helpful there. Zoe has their hand raised. Zoe, if you have a question, feel free to send it in the chat. Kedar also said they didn't address the professor, and that's another thing that's really important. Just saying, hey there, might be a little bit too informal, and it doesn't really have that degree of respect that you might want to give to your professor. So maybe something along the lines of hello or hi, Professor blank would be a little bit more appropriate. I think you guys hit a lot of the main points there. Here are all the things that we came up with. So the formal greeting and tone, making sure to include that course and unique number, correct punctuation and grammar. Also, making sure that any questions that you're emailing to ask haven't been answered by any previous materials provided by the professor. That's probably their biggest pet peeve, is like when people ask them questions that could easily be answered by the syllabus. Just make sure that you're doing your due diligence there too beforehand. And then also timing of the request. If you're asking them to review something for you for a paper that's due at 11:59 and you're emailing them at like 11:50 that night, that's a problem. You want to make sure that you're allotting a good amount of time for the request at hand and making sure that you're being very proactive there. Also show your appreciation. Make sure you're ending with like a thank you and showing that you appreciate the time they took to generate that answer and send it over to you. Also be very wary of the reply all button. Don't spam the entire class. You might not want everyone to be able to to see your response there. So just double, triple check that reply line, who is it being sent to, who is CC'd, all of that information. So now we're going to go over a few tips from some of our Sanger tutors. So as we mentioned before, Sanger has tons of tutors that are able to help you primarily with a lot of like the core classes, the freshman year classes that you would take. So this is just a tip from one of the tutors, Sanjna, and she says, my friends and I do Zoom calls and work problems together. There are many ways to engage in study groups. So study groups can really come in handy. And we came up with like a bunch of different tips for how to go about setting up a study group, especially in those synchronous, online, asynchronous classes. It might be difficult to get to know who your classmates are, and if anyone's really interested in joining a study group and creating that accountability system and working together. So what you could do is you could go through Canvas, and if you go, you can go ahead and click on the course and go through the different people in the class, and you could just send a Canvas email and see if anyone is interested there, or post an announcement. Or you can go through GroupMe. A lot of classes already have GroupMes established that you could just go through and see if anyone is interested, and put together a small group that you can potentially work with. Before you would meet with your group, definitely be sure to send that Zoom meeting link and create consistency in like what your mode of communication will be, whether it'll be GroupMe, Slack, iMessage, etc. And also come in with a plan. So when I say come in with a plan, what I mean is definitely set up an agenda before you go into any type of study group meeting. Just in that you want to make sure that you are not allotting this time and just coming in and saying, okay, like what do you guys want to talk about? Just because it's really, really easy to get off topic and then not really cover the bases that you were meant to cover. So just make sure that you come in with an agenda. Maybe you want to spend 20 minutes on this concept, 20 minutes on this concept, 20 minutes on this concept, and then that will be your hour-long study group for that week. And then you can do that every week and just review certain topics before you, just so that they sink in before you have to be tested over them. There's a lot of different uses for study groups as well, just in that you guys can pull your notes, do test prep together, quiz each other, have different members of your group come up with quiz questions, and then you can pass them around. And it would really help just having questions generated by someone else that you could answer, as opposed to just making questions for yourself, because people tend to just come up with questions that are based off of things they already know really well, as opposed to delving into the things that they might be struggling more so in. So having someone else come up with those questions really helps there. This is actually a handout from Sanger that will be included in the packet that we sent out. And if you have trouble accessing that for whatever reason, it's also on the Sanger website. So that should also be really helpful. Here's another tip from a tutor. When a friend doesn't understand something, then you explain it to them. I don't think there's a single instance where after you explain it again, you don't know it better. This is also really true, and it reinforces that idea of study groups, just in that when you work with a group of people and you're really comfortable with one concept and someone else is a little shaky on it and you explain it to them, that's one of the best ways to teach yourself to reinforce that content in your mind. And then if they teach it to you, then that also reinforces it for them. So it's just one of those things, is like, in order to be a teacher, you have to know this information on a really deep, granular level. And so then when you go and you explain it, it reinforces it in your mind, and you learn it even more and better, and you're able to apply that knowledge. And so it really helps you and it helps them, because they are able to understand more and you're able to understand it more. So now we're moving into the next phase of our presentation, which is getting organized. If you had any questions or concerns about what we have gone over so far, feel free to send those questions in the chat, and I will definitely go ahead and take a look at them. But if not, we're going to go ahead and move full steam ahead. So in terms of organization, things can get really tricky really fast in an online class. That rhymed unintentionally. I'm sorry about that. So attending lectures, doing assigned readings, completing your assignments, reviewing regularly, this can all take a lot of time and dedication, and it's really difficult to stick to a schedule. So I want you to take a minute and reflect on your strategies currently. How do you stay organized? How do you manage your time? Are you satisfied with the process, or are things falling through the cracks? If it happens, it happens. Like, and there's nothing to be ashamed of there. It's happened to me before too, where you thought an assignment was due a different day, or you got two deadlines mixed up, and then things do fall through. I see a lot of people are adding in the chat planner, color-coded calendar, Google Calendar. To those of you who are saying Google Calendar, you have my heart. I am completely 100% an advocate of Google Calendar. But whatever works for you, really, your paper planner or your calendar, it's really up to you. This is actually a deadline calendar that's like a paper calendar that Sanger offers as a handout. And so it's just one of the couple tools that we're going to go over today. This we go into a little bit more in depth in our time and procrastination workshop, but the reason that we're touching on it today is because it's one of those organizational tools that is crucial in getting everything together for the semester especially. So like, as you can see, it just has every month, and then the days, and then how you're meant to fill it out is you're meant to go through all of your major assignments for the semester, major exams, projects, things like that, and mark it up with all of those. That way you can see when your busiest weeks are, and you can plan ahead for them at least 2 weeks in advance. It can definitely be really, really frustrating. I 100% agree, Brenda. It can definitely get frustrating trying to stay organized. But this is just one tool that might make your life just a little bit easier. Just being able to see what that semester looks like, what your next month or two looks like even before you get there. That way you can plan ahead for it. So this is the deadline calendar. Something else that I really like is our weekly calendar. And so who here uses to-do lists? Who likes to-do lists? Looks like we have a good number of people here. I also love to-do lists, but the problem with to-do lists is that they make it really, really easy for items to roll over to the next day. So the great thing about this weekly calendar is that it lets you budget your time by the hour. And so say you wanted to get done with 3 different assignments today, rather than just saying, these are the 3 things I want to get done today, you would go through and you would budget your time. You'd say, okay, from 6 to 7 p.m. today, I'm going to be working on this. And then from 7 to 8 p.m., I'll be working on this. And just, but actually budgeting time and reserving that time for that actual item on your list is really important. Michelle said the Google List app is so good. That's a one that I haven't heard of before, but I'll definitely look into for sure. I know you can basically do this on Google Calendar as well if you want to go through and budget your time according to the hours of the day there. But yeah, using those daily to-do lists, making sure that you are aware of how much time each activity that you're taking on will take, and budgeting the time for that, that's really important. And it's great that so many of you have already taken that proactive approach with it. So you'll get these in the packet that we're sending out for this workshop, or you can go ahead and go on the Sanger Learning Center website and download them. and they'll definitely come in handy. I know earlier in the chat, some people were talking about sticky notes. This is a tip from a tutor that talks a little bit about it as well. He says, I use sticky notes and write everything I need to do the next day. And while that might be helpful, I've tried the sticky note system before as well. It can definitely get a little disorganized, especially if you don't have things organized by the day and the time. So just keeping that in mind, how are you going about making sure that you're budgeting your time and being aware of your busy days up ahead? So now we're gonna move on into communication a little bit. Managing all of your emails and things like that can get really overwhelming. It was overwhelming before, but now it's even more overwhelming because you have more things to worry about, just in terms of all this correspondence that you're constantly receiving. Okay, Afreen asks, do you have any advice on how we should deal with falling behind on our schedule, especially when it's hour by hour? So what the important thing there is to make sure that you are not completely abandoning your schedule. If you missed this 1 hour allotment, you want to make sure that you reallocate, you go ahead and budget another time slot for what you missed, and you still continue to follow the schedule as closely as possible. It can be really easy to get discouraged, be like, oh, well, I missed this. Well, then what's the point of having this calendar, and just like abandoning it altogether. But making sure that you're keeping in mind like how you can still be flexible with it as well, leaving some time for you to reallocate that activity and still be able to stay as close as possible to it as you can. So we can talk a little bit more about that toward the end of the presentation. I'll be collecting more questions and answering them there. But back to the topic of communications, it can be really difficult to manage your inbox right now. And so there's a few different tips that I can offer you there, especially if you have more unread emails in your inbox right now than read emails. There's definitely some tips that I can offer you that might help make your life just a little bit easier. So from Canvas notifications to professors' emails to peer study group messages, your inbox might look like a nightmare at this point. So one tip that has made managing my inbox a little bit easier has been going through and flagging emails and marking certain senders as VIPs so that I get alerts when those emails are sent, rather than sifting through my entire inbox. Something that Sanger recommends is going through and sorting your emails into separate folders depending on the course. And so depending on like what platform you use for your email, whether it be Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, Outlook, just go ahead and go through and Google how you would go about setting up that sorting system depending on that platform. And you can set it up, and if you just invest that 15 or 30 minutes right now, it'll save you a lot of time going forward. Something else that you want to take into account as you're working toward being the most productive version of yourself is creating a workspace that you can actually work in. So I want you to take a second and reflect on your current workspace. What does that look like for you? Do you sit at a desk? Do you sit on your bed? Is there a lot of noise? What does your current workspace look like? And what do you think are some ways that you could go about making that better? Personally, when I was back in Dallas, my workspace was essentially just my desk, and my desk was fine, but my chair was kind of uncomfortable. I remember there were a few distractions in terms of like my family being really loud. So there were a lot of things that I thought I could improve upon my workspace to make me more productive throughout the day. So I wouldn't get distracted as easily, and I would be able to focus and really grind when I'd sit down to work. So that, yes, Abigail said that she sits at her desk and studies, and that's a really good habit to have, honestly. Creating a workspace as opposed to just sitting on your bed and working, just because you want to create that separation in your mind between your workspace and your rest space. Just so it not only will it make you more productive when you sit down to work at your desk, but it will also make your mind feel more at peace when you actually sit down or lay down to go to bed, just because it'll know that it's time to sleep. And if you struggle with insomnia, or it's hard to just get your mind to shut off for a little bit, it'll be a good habit to have in place to get you to go to sleep faster and sleep better. So it seems like a lot of you guys are ahead of the game there, making sure that you separated your workspace from your rest space. So kudos to you on that. This tutor also says, I would not recommend trying to watch lectures from bed. And we clearly know why. Sanjana is back again, and with her tip where she says, turn off your phone and put it away, turn off notifications on your laptop. I know it can easily get really distracting, especially if you have a Mac and you see all those iMessage messages, or if you see a lot of stuff from just social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. It can get really difficult to just focus on class. So there is a website called Blocker that comes in handy when you want to just limit all social media alerts and things like that, that you can definitely look into. Or you can try just leaving your phone in another room, or find ways to incentivize yourself to stay away from social media sites and things that might pose potential distractions for you. One potential incentive could be finding someone to watch lectures with, and just if you have someone who will watch the lecture with you without necessarily distracting you with other conversation, that can be really helpful because it'll hold you accountable. You'll watch it, and you'll be less tempted to look at your phone or look at your laptop, or look at other things on your laptop. So now that we've talked a lot about your workspace, I want you to take a second and just reflect on what your current workspace is and one way in which you can improve it. And if you want to go ahead and just send that in the webinar chat, that would be really helpful. What is one thing you would improve about your workspace? Jacob says, I can declutter my desk to have more space. Definitely. That would honestly help declutter your mind a little bit too. There's this one quote that talks a little bit about how like your room is a reflection of your mental state a little bit. And so just keeping it clean and organized will help you with your focus as well. Putting my phone away, putting your phone away, definitely. Sometimes I have to just like leave another room, turn it off, get away from it, and just to focus on task at hand. I wish I had more sunlight. That's something I wish for as well, especially with how rainy it's been all day today. It just makes me want to take a nap, but just having the sun can really like motivate you and just keep you a little bit more alert and active. Cassandra said, raise my chair a bit. Lauren said, something I could do is invest in organizing, better storage. Elisa said, a more comfortable chair. Same, dude, same. organize my desk and workspace overall. Yeah, so definitely just keeping that workspace clean and organized and ready to go for when you're ready to work is definitely something that we should all take into account. So thank you so much for letting me share this content with you today. If you have any questions or concerns, I'll be answering them in just a moment. But just to give you a brief overview of Sanger's services, we do have a lot of tutoring services that are offered. Definitely go on the Sanger website to be able to book a session. We offer tutoring for tons of core classes. And when you receive that packet, you'll also be able to see a listing of all the classes that we offer tutoring from, both one-on-one and group. And then we also have meetings that you can set up with peer coaches and learning specialists. And so a meeting with a peer coach would be a regular meeting like every week or so. And you would be able to cover your routine and your time management skills and how you could go about doing that with a student who's already been there and who kind of understands your workload and how much time things will take. And then you could also set up a meeting with a learning specialist, which would also be really beneficial. These are professionals who would help you with in the time management capacity, also with improving upon your motivation and things like that. So I actually sent the packet to Shri, so she should be able to send it out to all of you as well in a zip file. And you can just extract the documents from within that file and go ahead and look at one of them. One of them will be Sanger Learning Resources. Or you can go ahead and just do what we all do, go on Google and type in UT Sanger Learning Resources and go on there and look them up.
Yeah, I can email that out to everybody who signed up today. And then it's also going to be on our Canvas site, which we will give you access to next week.
Yep. And then if you have a second, please fill out this survey. We definitely want feedback on this workshop, seeing as it is a new workshop, and just on the content, what was helpful, what was not so helpful, would definitely come in handy for us. So thank you again, and if you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them. I see there's one in the Q&A where it says, how much time should we set for each class's study times? So this depends on the class for sure. I think most professors recommend like for every hour in class, like a couple hours outside of class. But it definitely depends on the class itself. So depending on which class you're asking for, it's definitely going to vary. So if you want a more specific answer, I would definitely ask your professor. Shri, I think there's a UT for Me specific question that you may be able to answer.
I didn't sign up today, but I came through UT for Me. Will I still be getting the packet? Yes, I will take the list of people who signed up or who registered, like who came into this webinar. So it'll give me a list of everybody who is currently on the webinar right now, and I will email that out to you all. And like I said, it'll also be on our Canvas page, which you'll have access to starting next week.
There's also one in the Q&A actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I came here late, but I know UT for Me offers help such as writing. How can I get that help? I would email your program coordinator back and they can send you the links to the Writing Center and other resources that are available on campus.
So Sierra, my major is actually Management Information Systems, so it's in McCombs. I struggle a lot with reading fatigue, especially when it's reading off a screen. Do you have tips to stay focused or breaking it up effectively? So I also struggle with reading off a screen for extended amounts of time. What I would recommend is, well, this also depends on the class, but if it's for like an English or history class, you may be able to find an audiobook. personally, like audiobooks and podcasts and things like that, it's easier for me to pay attention to if I'm like walking around. That's helpful. And then in terms of just any other classes that you might have to read for, you might want to consider just scheduling like breaks rather than just sitting down and trying to read like an entire chapter. Getting up after every like 5-10 pages and walking around or switching locations, whatever you can do to keep your mind awake when it might be really tempting to just fall asleep.
Sana, can I add something as well?
Of course.
Something that I did during grad school, because the amount of reading I had to do in grad school was a lot heavier than undergrad. I too fall asleep the moment I start reading something. I ended up downloading an app that's a PDF reader. And so I would follow on the screen as it read to me, because otherwise I would just, if I was reading myself, I would fall straight to sleep within 5 minutes. And so that's how I kind of combated that. And in the same way, I was able to make my time commuting to campus in the car useful by having that PDF reader read my materials to me as I was driving. So I was kind of being like double productive by getting to campus while listening to my required readings.
Is there a Sanger Learning Center Canvas page? So I don't think there's a Canvas page, unless if there is a Canvas course for UT for me, that might be it. But if you want more information on Sanger itself, you can always like just go on the website. If you just type UT Sanger Learning Center, everything comes up. Oh, there's an extension on Chrome that converts the textbook to audio. That is good to know. If you want to send the name of that extension, I'd probably look into it as well. All right, if there's any other questions, feel free to send them, or I can always pass along my email as well. But if there's nothing else, thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed presenting to you. Thank you for all your interaction in the chat, and I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, Sana, this was super helpful. Thank you so much. It's very engaging too, and I'm sure our students got a lot out of it. So we really, really appreciate that. And then for those of you who like this workshop as well, we are going to be doing the part 2 of this the first week of October. So we will send that out soon as well. And also look out for our civic engagement workshop. We're going to be doing that at the end of this month, that 3rd or 4th week of September, teaching you all about how to register to vote, the importance of voting, and all of that. So that kind of answers the question that's in the Q&A right now. Do we meet every week, or is it a one-time thing? We're working to hold probably about 2 workshops a month on different things that we think would be useful for you all to know as first-year students. And then our student ambassadors will also be working on doing one type of social event a month as well. So keep an eye out on your emails, and we will get those to you. But thank you all for coming, and thank you again, Sana. We really appreciate it. That was great.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.